But when we were there, I was able to go up and down it on my own without, 20 people behind me. So I was able to, and I really felt quite often like there was somebody or some residual energy that is retained in that staircase going up and down. You can feel it. You can sort of pass through it, or it passes by you. And so it's sort of an interesting spot there. Now, and I guess, Ian, like you say, when you go through with the public, you don't really get to experience that, I don't think, as much.
No.
I've been up, when you're with the public.
I've been up that staircase. I've been down the other staircase from his study that leads down to the wine cellar.
Right, yeah.
But as you say, it could be residual energy because there's so much wood.
Yeah, it would hold. It
in there, and wood,
energy.
Of course, is an absorbent of residual energy.
Right. Yes. And that's it, right? So I find that too. It's more for me, I think, a residual energy in that area, especially in that office. He had his other office upstairs too, which has the sort of rounded walls in it, and that one. But I don't think that he tended to use that one as much as the lower level office. And so I think that he tended to use the one that was on the main floor more often than the one on the second floor that I think was more later on when his wife was ill, that he may have spent more time upstairs and then going downstairs. I mean, really, virtually you could have 10 people in that building and not even know they're there.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it's so vast, and the rooms are by no means tiny. Like that downstairs office of Palat's it's small in comparison to the other rooms, but it's certainly not a small room by standards of today. I mean, that's the size of somebody's living room, maybe bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of the size of the rooms within the castle itself, especially the main rooms, it's not considered that big. But another area too, which we should touch on because nobody really ever talks about it, but the billiard room. So right, the billiard room. It's an interesting room because it has a very Masonic feel to it.
Okay.
In the space. I don't know if you picked up on that, Ian. Did you feel like it was
not at all.
Somewhat Masonic feeling? And I'm not saying in terms of being used as a Masonic, but I think it was just the decor and the layout of the room feels very Masonic to me. It was kind of that men's, private area that, women dared not go, sort of feeling to it, right? Which I often pick up on when I go into old Masonic temples and they have their billiard room, and it's got that same feel to it, and that's sort of what I feel. But there's supposedly, of course, in Casa Loma, I want to say, and I'm just going to look it up just so that I get the right name for it, but just double check it here just to make sure that I get it right, because it is the let's just see if it's actually in here, because there was a rumor that inside Casa Loma was the seat of the one of the Scottish clans, right? And Hollywood and the whole sort of attachment of that.
And,
yeah. I've never heard that before. Oh.
Yeah, I just want to see. Yeah, let me just double check it. Yeah, well, I kind of discovered that when I was working in there doing that, and there was this sort of play on, there's that secret stone in Scotland, and supposedly it was, brought to Casa Loma, and so there was a seat. Yeah, here it is here. Okay, so let's just see what we have here, because I just want to see what it has to say. You can see, like it was something that was, there it is. Okay, it's the coronation chair. So there's a coronation chair showing the stone of Scone, reminding us of the Queen's Scottish ancestry. So apparently it was said that it's an exact replica of the coronation chair and the coronation chain in Westminster Abbey, and shows the names that were carved by the Westminster schoolboys. And then there's that, there's this chair, and then there's this chain, and there's all of these stories that go with the castle itself, and sort of, these crazy things. But yeah, there was some, and I can't remember the exact connection, but there was sort of a connection as to something with the Holyrood and the whole, again, Masons and et cetera. So I'm sure Palat was probably a member of the Masons. I wouldn't doubt that he was not at that time, because most people were. So that may have been the connection. But this replica chair, at one point, people, and I was reading some of the history, were saying that it was the real chair, and that the chair at Westminster was actually the replica, and Casa Loma had the real chair, and yeah. So there's always those stories, and obviously we're never going to know if it's true or not. But I would suspect that it's certainly a replica at Casa Loma, but who knows, right? So ghosts at Casa Loma. So there's apparently been sightings of Sir Henry Palat himself at Casa Loma. There's been a young boy who's been reported to have seen Palat standing in his second floor bedroom window. So there's some of that. There's, of course, Lady Mary, who's been spotted on the grounds herself. Lady Mary, there's what I can only say as the noise in the tunnel. Numerous times when I was there, I would have to go from the main castle over to the stable and back and forth quite frequently. And I did it a lot, back and forth. And of course, I'm dressed in my Elizabeth I black ermine dress, and I'm full out Queenie here for the day. And it's a bit of a trot through, is it not, Ian? It's a pretty good haul on that tunnel.
It's a long tunnel. It's
I'd say it's about a quarter of a kilometer.
Yeah, it's 600 feet or 800 feet.
Yeah, something like that. It's a very long tunnel. And you can imagine in Palat's time, I mean, going to 1911, he being in charge of the electrical of the city at the time and the company, it would have had lighting in it. I mean, that was obviously the one thing with Casa Loma, is it was well retrofitted with electricity. It wasn't one of these. But the tunnel would have had some lighting in that. But even today, that lighting is still rather sporadic. I mean, it's lit, but it's not, it's not bright in there. And it's very damp in there.
It's
very dim, and it's very wet. And I know that, it's very damp. Yeah, it holds that condensation, right? Because and on a really hot day, it's one of the coolest places to be, is down in the tunnel. Yeah. But when I used to go back and forth, I would often hear this clip clop on the concrete floor, like a horse hooves. And I'm not the only person. Yeah, I'm not the only person who has said to have heard that. And my conundrum with that is today, and I'm going to suspect it hasn't changed, is how did the horses get into the tunnel? Because
good question.
Because there's staircases.
Yes, that's a big question.
Yeah, they certainly didn't walk down the stairs.
No, there's staircases that there's no way that a horse could possibly get down. And it would seem very odd to have a horse, because in the tunnel because where are you taking it to the main house? Are you taking it to
Not
the
likely, no. Why would you do that? Yeah.
No, but
and
but
talking about the tunnel, I think we should mention, well, why is there a tunnel to begin with?
Yeah, why is there a tunnel exactly?
And what I understand is when Henry Palat was building Casa Loma and the stables and the garage area, he wanted to close off the street in front of the castle, Austin Terrace. And the city told him, no, we can't do that. And so he said, well, then that's fine. I'll just dig a tunnel underneath it. And that's apparently how the tunnel came to be.
Yeah, because he didn't want to have to cross the road from the main house over to his stables and to the hunting lodge because they put a road in.
Oh my gosh! Right? Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Now, what I've heard, the horses sound within the tunnels. It's my understanding that the spirit of the caretaker from the stable, who is the man who was hired to look after Henry Palat's horses, he's there. And that brings me to our second experience that we had. As I say, I was kind of freaked out with the vibes in the swimming pool. My partner, Trudy, she had an experience down in that tunnel. And I was wandering up and down the tunnel because I was thrilled with this tunnel. I was like a little kid at Christmas going back and forth, going, ooh, and filming and all that kind of stuff. Because I love places like that. And Trudy was standing in the area where there's that open spot where you can look down onto the boiler furnaces.
Oh, the old furnace, the old coal.
Yeah.
For the boiler, yes.
Yeah, and when she was standing there, of course, I'm off somewhere else in the tunnel, wandering back and forth. She felt fingers go through her hair.
Interesting.
And so we suspect, based on the stories, that it was this caretaker who looked after the horses.
Right.
Now, we have no proof one way or the other whether that is factual or not, but that's our ghost stories for the building itself.
Yeah, and it's funny because you say that because there have been other people that have remarked about somebody being in that tunnel and have actually had their hair grabbed or pulled as well while they're down there in the tunnel. So that's definitely something that has been reported more than once. At least if you do digging into the stories. It's not like it made it on the news last night. It's one of those things that seems to get reported quite frequently. I, at one point, remember, I don't know how old I was. I may have been 14. I was there, and I guess I was there with my mom and my brother probably, and my aunt. We went. And back in those days, the castle was less busy than it is now, right? I mean, Toronto in 1977, while being touristy and still a place of thing, it was much less congested. So I can remember going into Casa Loma as a young teenager and as a kid and kind of being able to almost roam freely without bumping into another person, like every 5 feet like you do now, right? So it was much more accessible without a lot of people. But I do also remember having an incident there in that boiler area of seeing a man in my peripheral, in my mind's eye, however you might want to describe it, actually shoveling coal into the furnace. So I could see this man. Yeah, and I always remember that down there. I remember seeing him, and even when I go now, I still mentally I remember that image that I saw of and there was nobody there. It was just a spirit, presenting itself. But you could see him shoveling coal into this furnace, down there, and So kind of and I wonder, again, if that is not one in the same